This week in a conversation, I have the privilege to welcome out of Atlanta, Georgia, prolific writer, Rose Carmel Gaspard. We're going to be talking about her fantastic fantasy novel titled Selah, Book of Books, which is a prequel of a series that is forthcoming. But before we get into this video, I just want to remind everyone that it's important to subscribe to this YouTube channel. And if you do, don't forget to click the notification bell so that way every time a video is posted, it'll go directly into your portal. So let's get started.
Okay.
Again, my name is Ardain Isma, and I'm here this evening with an impeccable writer joining me from Atlanta, Georgia. I am speaking this evening with Rose Carmel Gaspard. We're going to be talking about her fantastic fantasy novel titled Book of Books Chronicles. So, Rose, welcome to the conversation.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Otherwise, would you please tell the viewers of CSMS Magazine who is Rose Carmel Gaspard?
My name is Rose Carmel Gaspard. I was born in Haiti and I moved to New York City when I was 10. Did all my schooling in New York, got married, had 3 kids, and then we later on moved to Georgia. I work in healthcare. Well, that's typical for a Haitian. If you know any Haitians, we usually work in healthcare.
Really?
I started writing. I've written, I think, all my life. I have tons of notebooks of stories and ideas and poetry. And I used to want to be published, traditionally published. And then later on in life, I kind of changed my mind and decided I wanted the freedom to write, and not have to have it based on what my publisher felt was marketable or what my editor felt was marketable. So then about when my son was born, he was just a few months old, a story for Selah kind of came to me at 3:00 in the morning, when you have a brand new baby and you're up all night with him. And the story came to me, and it took me about 3.5 years to write the story and finally get it published.
Okay. And you know what? You're not alone in this. More and more writers coming to the conversation are saying the same thing.
Yeah.
You just want freedom and independence.
Yeah.
From particular, from indie publishers who would probably want to take their work for granted. Mm-hmm. And I'm a writer myself, Rose, and I resist that fact too. So yeah. And especially these days, there are many avenues a writer can use to publish.
Oh, there's definitely more freedom now than there was, even so much as 5-10 years ago. We have so many different platforms where you can publish your work and have that freedom and still be able to bring in, some royalty and still have control over that too, how much you take home.
I understand it. Okay, so let's dive into Selah, Book of Books Chronicles. Right, so let me get this thing right. Because from the get-go, you say that hours after giving birth, Selah Jacobi, his mother, leaves him literally on a dumpster near the hospital and disappeared.
Yep.
And the baby was finally adopted. Mm-hmm. And Selah's adopted mom and grandfather actually happened to be the ones to raise him after a court decided that this is exactly what's going to happen. And I know at this point, I can see that the social work in you right now in this particular narrative right here.
That is absolutely correct.
Okay. Was that the way you've decided to frame the story this way? Because you frame the story in a territory that you know well.
Yes. I worked in social services from, my God, I think it has to be the first 18 years, maybe, after I got out of college. And I worked for DFACS here in Georgia for a year and a half, where I did placement. I was a social worker who had to find a home for children who, who for whatever reason were removed from the home or who were abandoned. So yeah, I think the story starts basically almost in the category of where I started in my adult life after
Right in the
college.
trenches where you fight, right?
Yes.
Okay. You know what? Just so you know that my wife is a clinical social worker. So for many years,
Yeah.
she's worked for DCF or many other institutions, and then she switched to work for big insurance companies and all that.
Yeah. I even worked in social for DFAX, well, DFS, right? They call it in Florida. I even worked there too for a while, doing the exact same thing. I was a caseworker as well,
Okay.
taking children. So
Okay.
yeah, they say to write what you know, right?
Exactly. Exactly. So Selah was rescued, but at some point, tragedy also befalls Selah,
Yeah.
and lost granddaddy,
Mm-hmm.
adopted mom,
Yep.
and then he's left alone to being shuffled between different foster homes.
Yep.
And at some point, let me get it right. It says that he feels lost,
Yeah.
unloved, and unwanted.
Yeah. Yeah.
Could you please educate?
Sadly, that's the case for a lot of children in foster care.
Can you educate the audience from the perspective of a social worker?
That's the part why I couldn't stay, because eventually it breaks your heart. You know, you want to take every child home. You want to give them the home that they are looking for, but that feeling of being shuffled, it's the worst. I remember some mornings I'd come in on Monday morning and there would be a little kid sitting in my cubicle with a black garbage bag because they were removed from the home the previous evening or early that morning, and I have to sit there with that child right here, while you're trying to make phone calls to find them at home. And I used to hurt me in so many levels. I couldn't imagine what a 7-year-old would feel sitting there, watching you go from one home to the next, to the next, to the next, without having their permanent home. And sadly, some age out of the system. They never find that permanent home. Yeah.
One thing also you said, let me see if I can get this right, Rose. Okay, this is where the story immediately switches from, let's say, the reality that we know of to the fantasy world. Okay, where you say that after being rejected by the latest family, he meets a stranger who he feels inexplicably drawn to. As the person's name is Enoch, right? Okay, who explains to him that he's a direct descent of Adam, the first man,
Yeah.
and as such is the only one who can save humanity or the human race.
Yeah.
This is completely within fantasy territory at this point, but I can still see between the line of the social justice realm also
Yes.
the pain of Rose Carmel Gaspard.
Yes, I tend to take on a lot of other people's pain and burdens. It is what it is at this point. I'm not gonna change. I'm 46 years old. I'm gonna die like that. But yes, Selah finds out that you have to think that this is a boy who thinks he's nobody. You know what I mean? He's nothing. He has no mother, he has no father, he has no family. Everything he owns is in a bag. And he goes from home to home to home, from family to family to family. He's nobody, and he knows he's 15. In a few years, he's going to age out the system. He's going to be given $21 and he's going to be put on a train, and that's going to be it. He has nothing great to think about for the future.
Really? Here's how that works.
Well, not exactly $21, but when they age out, they're given a certain amount of money. Some of them, if they have a really caseworker, then they find them job aids. Some go to college. I think a mayor, I think it's Cincinnati. He was a foster kid who aged out, and he wrote a book a few years back. I can't remember. When I worked in social services, that's when I read his book, telling his story, how he aged out of the system and he became the mayor. So they're all great stories for these kids.
Okay.
And he's feeling bad, you know what I mean? If you've ever had that terrible night, that day where everything is bad, where you wish you never woke up that morning. It's just
Right.
really horrible day. And at
Right.
the top of that moment,
Right.
that's when he meets Enoch, who tells him the secret about himself and tells him, not only are you not nobody, you are basically the person. All of heaven is waiting for you to wake up and see this. The stars and the moon are waiting to see you become more. And then now this child has this responsibility for a world that he felt rejected by. You have to remember, this is a kid who had nothing, and now you're saying you have to save everybody. And that's when
Let me ask you something.
Mm-hmm.
I know you said you've been writing and reading since you were very young. Then again, it's taken you. It took you about 3 years to conceive this novel, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if I understand, this is a prequel.
It is.
Of a series, that is forthcoming.
Yes.
My question is, how long do we have to wait to lay our hands on the next one, on book 2?
It's going to be next year. I'm hoping, if the muse stick with me, that I should have it done. I want to put it out by Easter, if not Easter, Pentecost, or around that time. You know what I mean? So definitely by spring next year, book 2 or the book is going to come out. Yeah.
Interesting. You're just going to be that prolific writer.
Yeah. The thing with me is it takes me a while, because sometimes the story will take me where I don't expect to go.
Okay.
I'll start with an idea in my mind of what's going to happen and where Selah is going to go, what he's going to think or what he's going to do. And then he'll get there and then he'll do something else. And now I'm like, well, that's interesting. So now here I am, and it takes me on a tangent, and I won't write something unless I do research. So now I'm stopping the writing to do the research to make sure that what I'm thinking and feeling, it has a good follow-up, it has meat to it. So then it takes me a while, but I'm trying to be more disciplined and not let my imagination take me too far, so that I can stick to my timeline.
That's true. And you know what they say, the biggest part in writing, because you're already a writer, is to put together the story. It's just to build the world that you want to create.
Right.
And it takes more time, because when you finally sit down to write, it goes through smoothly. It's like you're swimming across, or you're wading across an ocean of words.
Yes. That's exactly it. Yes, you are absolutely right.
Okay, so Rose, listen, there's something you say I really like it a lot. Okay, you say, I am not a guru. I have not studied Eastern philosophies, and I am not a psychologist or a psychotherapist. I am a person who has learned to develop myself, who has learned to love myself and all my challenges. Could you explain to us, or what are the challenges that you said you hope? Because most people, they hit the challenges, they fight them until they overcome them.
Yes.
But you said you embrace the challenges too. Is that because you think challenges in life make you a stronger, a better person?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, well, when you're in it, it's hard for you to see it, right? But as I got older, and I literally see every tragedy in my life, everything that's gone wrong, how it led me to something else that I would not have experienced had I not gone through that. Beautiful. Starting from moving to the States so young, my father's death at 16 from cancer, which I know for a fact led me to social services, and healthcare. My mom having Alzheimer's.
Wow.
Getting, moving. My mother passed away, and I moved from New York, started a new job with 3 kids, and all of that happened within 3 weeks. And it was mind-numbingly painful. So all these horrible things that happen to you, they make you stronger, because you get muscles by lifting heavy things, right? That's how you build muscle. And that's the exact same thing for your spirit, for your mind, and as it does for your body.
Correct.
It's the exact same thing. There's no grit, no pearl. Diamonds are built under pressure.
I got you.
And when you're in it, it's hard to see. And I know that because I've had the same experiences, where it's just so dark and you can't imagine there ever be a light. And then, you know what, the sun comes up the next day anyway, and you get up and you put one foot in front of the other anyway. And the conversations we have up here are the most important conversations we'll ever have. It's how you speak to yourself. If you're kind to yourself, you know, you give yourself a break. And that's what I meant when I said that. I don't know if what I did was correct, but I do know that it got me out, you know, and I'm
That's
here.
pretty powerful.
And sometimes your story is just a blueprint for someone else, you know?
Beautiful. That's right.
So that's what I write.
That's right. Okay. I just want to ask you something because I know since we Haitians, and no matter how far we've gone in life,
Yeah.
you know, we carry some sort of an unspoken pain,
Yeah.
you know, every time we think about our country,
Yes.
you know, and every time they talk about our country.
Yes.
So it's always it's always a personal struggle. So when you arrived in New York at a very, very young age, was it very difficult for you at school?
Oh, it was absolutely horrible. I think I didn't fall in love with America, I think, until I got to college. From the time I landed, my father died when I was 16. So then I knew I couldn't go back home. So that was like, well, now I'm stuck here. And I didn't fall in love, like I said, until I got to university. When I got to college and I started meeting different people from different parts of the country, and I started really learning and seeing my mind kind of spread, that's when I
Exactly.
fell in love with the possibilities of America. But coming here was hard. I missed my home. I missed my great grandmother who, like, on Twitter, I talk about her all the time. And there's an old African saying that says, if a person dies and you never speak about them, then they die twice.
Exactly.
Never let
Exactly.
go. I talk about her all the time. I talk about my mom. I talk about my dad, who've all passed away. And losing her, losing my father, losing my home, my culture, my school, my friends, it was, and the culture shock. I went from school in Haiti to school here is very different.
So how old were you when you
I was 10.
you were 10?
And so now here I am in school where, you know, I remember, I don't know how long, well, you said you came in not too long ago in Haiti. When a teacher or an adult walks in the room, we would stand up. So my first few weeks here, I was constantly standing up whenever another teacher or someone walked in the room, to the point where my teacher, why do you keep doing that? And I'm like, I'm sorry, I didn't, you know? So it was very culturally, very difficult and emotionally, you know, and psychologically, obviously. It was all very, very hard, and I still miss it.
I think we all the same. Well, because for me, I was older, so I was able to manage the situation a little better than you were. But it was also extremely difficult for me too, because my parents were not with me, and I lived with my sister. As a matter of fact, there's my upcoming novel, which is titled Bittersweet Souvenirs of Last Spring. And it tells the story of a protagonist, you know, through the lenses of what I've been through when I came to.
I've thought about doing that as well. A friend of mine actually told me, you know, you should tell that story. It's just, I guess my favorite genre is fantasy. And I feel that if I had to tell this story, it would have to not be under the guise of a fantasy novel, you know, which would make
Exactly. You could do a memoir if you want to.
Yeah, it would make it a little more vulnerable, I guess. I came around the time of the whole Duvalier thing happening and all the political unrest that was going on at the time. So I think about it, but I don't know if I'm ready or if I'll ever be ready to tell, you know. But I'll read that book when it comes out.
Thank you. You'll be able to get your hand on it. Rose, okay, so every time in the conversations, we always switch from talking about literature and we switch to something cozy. Last time I had Rose Carmel, filmmaker from Miami. She's Haitian also, but a childhood friend. We talk about Haitian cuisine. Okay. So is it what you have also in the house?
No.
No.
Like, I was 10. I do it sometimes. I did it more when I was married. I did it more when I was married. Now that I'm divorced, it's a lot of pasta and a lot of other stuff. And I'm also vegan now.
Oh, you are.
So yeah, there's some things I can still make Haitian vegan, like I'll make legume, that's
Mm.
easy, and other stuff, and it's a lot of it, and my kids love it, but it's not something I do every day. It takes a
Okay.
lot, you know what I mean? It's a lot more complicated than just boiling some pasta and 1, 2, 3.
How about compa, the famous Haitian music?
Oh, that's my music. That all my kids know it. They have favorite songs. When I'm in the car, I pick them up from track or
Blasting away, huh?
oh yes, mommy, yeah, they all know it and they dance it. You know what I mean?
Okay. Me too. I'm just crazy about music, That
I love
Haitian
it.
music, it's in my vein. I say, when I die, they need to play that too.
Yeah, I love music. That's another art form, music, art, writing, anything that allows someone to express themselves. I think is beautiful. I love music.
Okay, my next question. Okay, who is your favorite Haitian writer?
Sadly, I don't have one. And if I have a writer that's Haitian, then I don't know if they are Haitian because there are people who write stuff and you don't necessarily know their nationalities. But when I was a teenager, I read 2 books by Edwidge Dantika.
I knew you were going to say her name.
I read Quick Crack, and at the time it was big. Everybody I knew was reading it. So I read that. But I don't, sadly, and I don't like the fact that I don't have a lot of famous Haitian authors, but I don't, that's the only one I could think of.
You could think of.
Yeah.
Now, from Haitian writers to any writer whatsoever, who's your favorite author?
Favorite author, Octavia Butler.
Octavia?
Yes, I read her when I was a teenager. I'm a fantasy sci-fi writer. I love stories that aren't based on everyday stuff. Like I said, I grew up on my grandmother's stories. So I didn't know Black women could write science fiction and fantasy.
Really?
Yeah. I'm like 13, 14, 15, and I'd never read a book that was a science fiction book and it had been
Written by a Black person.
A woman at that. And I read her first book of hers that I read was Pattern Master. And it was an entire series starting with Clay's Ark, and I read the whole series. And I saw this Black woman on the cover and I'm like, I can do that. If she can do it, I can do it. And I read anything of hers I could get my hands on, Kindred. And I fell in love with this book called Parable of the Sower. And I've read it in my life at least 3 or 4 times. I have a copy, and I've gotten a new copy because I lend it out and it doesn't come back. And it changed my perception of being a Black girl and the idea of wonder and magic, and have it not be, dark or you're the bad person. The savior was a Black teenage girl. And I fell in love with that book. So Octavia Butler is my favorite author ever.
Okay. Well, just for the purpose of time, you and I can talk forever.
I think so. I think we could.
For the purpose of time, Rose, my last question. If there's a lesson that you would want to give a young person like you who would want to embark upon a journey using a pen to tell a story, just like you just did with such a beautiful story, Selah, book of books. So what lesson would you give that person?
Right. Because you think no one's going to listen or want to hear your story. That's not true. There is an audience for your story. Just start writing it. Even if you write it without the idea of publishing it, write it. Even if it takes you 3.5 years to complete it, write it. Because at the end of the day, even if you don't publish it, once you put it pen to paper, you created it, like they say, take the vision, write it down so that someone else could run with it. just write. I literally write all day, every day. If a word comes to me, I write it down. If a phrase sounds cool to me, I write it down. And sometimes poetry comes out of a single sentence. And
That's interesting.
a whole story can come out of just something someone says, and then I'll think about it, and then all of a sudden it just starts spinning, and I'll write it down. You have to write it, and once you do, you've created, it's here. And whether or not someone else reads it, it's irrelevant. You read it and you wrote it, and that makes it permanent, and that's why I write.
You're just a person who speaks with deeply rooted conviction. I like that. Yeah, because your word is so powerful. What's what you call the sophistication of simplicity.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And with that, Rose, I just want to say it's been more than a pleasure to have you this evening in the conversation.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being here. I really enjoyed this.